This is Coda Radio, episode 165 for August 3rd, 2015. And welcome to Coda Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. This episode's brought to you by our two fine sponsors, DigitalOcean and Linux Academy. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our most established host who is excellent and on the East Coast. Why, yes, ladies and gentlemen, you guessed it. It's the Mr. Michael Dominic. Hey there, Mike.
Hello, hello.
Hey, handsome. So I was just sitting here thinking about you, thinking maybe we do a little podcast, call you up on a Monday, see what you're doing. And there you are. Magic. You know, we must have this, you know what? Great minds think alike. We must have been thinking the same thing. You want to do a show with me today? Maybe like
let's do it.
For like the 165th time? All right, okay, good. I'm a little fired up today. I'm going to share more on tomorrow's Tech Talk today. I have a review, but I ended up with this, I'm not joking. In fact, I'm going to Google this for you real quick, live here on the show. Cinch pop-up tents, okay? You can, if you want to Google with me at home, I recommend you do it. It is a Cinch. Here it is, Mr. Dominic. I'm just gonna show this to you. It's pretty cool. It's the Cinch pop-up tent, the ultimate pop-up tent with solar power and LED lights. And the idea is, you know, you just kind of get to your camping spot and then you just throw this tent down, and boom, you got yourself a tent. Instant camping. Great for a geek, right? Because it packs up like one of those screen visors for your car, and then you're off to go. So I went out camping this weekend and on Friday, and I went and stopped by a nice river spot, and I did a pop-up tent. They can see it right there if you're watching the video version. And I got to say, it was nice and relaxing. It was a good way to sort of unwind and unplug. And here's the best part. I had a little tiny bit of cellular signal. Just a little itsy bits of cellular signal. So I was actually able to check in and do a few things. So I didn't feel like I was like I lost all comforts of modern society. But at the same time, no one else was around. It was extremely peaceful and gorgeous. So I had a good weekend. I after reading the feedback, I realized, boy, I really need to get out more. I need to get out and relax more. And so I did an effort to do that. Now, how are you doing? How was your weekend, Mr. Dominic?
My weekend was okay. Did a little bit of work. Don't remember the rest of it.
You worked, okay. So okay. All right. So I was hoping you were going to come here and say, man, I had a good weekend. I feel recharged. I'm really fired up to do the show. But that's not, no. Well,
no, I'm trying to think, what the hell did I do this weekend?
Nonetheless, you have a pretty good show lined up, I got to say.
Yeah,
I like that.
Document.
Yeah, big old document. Big show today. Big show. And, I don't know. We were kind of on the pre-show. We were discussing some of the meta feedback. We have some feedback that we'll get to towards the end of the show. A couple that came in from the subreddit, a couple links and things like that. So we're gonna do some feedback. We got some hoopla to get into. You want to start with the hoopla right now? Are you ready to jump into
always ready.
All right. So you threw this one in here. It's the unemployable programmer. I like the URL too. It's unemployable.pen.io, and I fire this thing up, and it's a whole wall of text, and it is a monster post. And the guy starts with, I just wrote this in time for the next HN Hacker Network, I guess, Hacker News, who is hiring thread, in hopes to provide some perspective into a problem that is rarely addressed in programmer circles. But my story is somewhat typical, and I think easily overlooked. The unemployable programmer. Did this resonate with you, Mr. Dominic?
Not exactly. So that's why I put it in the show notes, actually. So go ahead and summarize it first before we dig into, because this is pretty meaty.
Okay. So he starts as a young nerd. He says, early in my life, my parents got me one of these Commodores, and he starts talking about how he got very early into BASIC and things like that. He's making little things and little programs, mostly games from an early on, and it was just pure happiness for him. It was a passion hobby. It was something he enjoyed. So he says, do it for a living. When I graduated from school, I naturally applied for a university, and I got my first job without having to go through any fancy universities, without knowing the right people, but just by virtue of being myself, I was employed and doing what I loved, which mirrors my story exactly. He says it was amazing. Everybody in the company knew my name, and I saw the work was I saw work not necessarily a choice between flipping burgers and drudging your life, Instead, programming allowed me to access a place where people had good life and were having fun. And then, it goes on to, in his early 20s, he wanted to increase the amount of time that he got to spend on this. He had a lot of passion. All of a sudden, he got to step up and be the one directing projects. Money kept coming in. Employees started getting hired. All of a sudden, he had a business. He says, we were vaguely aware that other startups were making huge money, having gigantic exits with what seemed like no product at all. By comparison, we were building what today would be referred to as a lifestyle business. Occasionally, we took meeting requests from investors or companies who wanted to buy us outright, but handing over our independence never seemed worth it considering the relatively meager amount of money on the offers. It seemed like we would simply earn that on our own by staying put. Then, the market collapsed. Dun, dun, dun!
Yep.
Our money was burning away fast. Rather than fire everybody, which would have been a sensible option, I kept the lights on as long as I could until I was personally deeply in debt, and it was finally time to shut down our little company. People moved on. A few hated me with a passion, but most just drifted away in disinterest as I took a real office job with a large company to pay down my debt.
All right, so if you pause here, it's still sympathetic, right? I'm still with him.
Yeah, absolutely, right?
Right. So to me, one flaw in this post is there's two huge things he wants to discuss. This whole what happens when one of these small startup boutiques collapses, which 99% do, right? I'm with you so far because people want to pretend like the owner is the business and it's not legally the truth. So you can have a separation. He chose not to, and he probably co-signed the lease or a line of credit or whatever. Right, whatever he did that was not smart, he did.
Yeah.
So I'm okay, right? I feel bad for him. I'm with him. I would like to have a beer with him so far.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah. So he says, realizing I needed to make a bigger commitment, I started looking for another job, browsing Hacker News threads. I started listing myself as looking for a full-time job, and I began writing emails begging for job interviews. Job interviews in programming and multi-stage and multi-resource training on the applicants. But I went in with vague optimism, hoping that despite that, nowadays you have to pass through several layers of random arbitrary screening in order to even get invited to even more grueling in-person interviews. When the companies find out I don't have a degree, that's usually the end of the road. You can tell that they actually read the CV when they tell you to get lost during the process. Wait, suppose they says you can tell they actually read the CV by when they tell you to get... Oh, right. Sometimes after wasting hours and talking to HR people, filling out IQ tests from questionable self-help websites, and going through programming challenges and enduring passive-aggressive phone interviews with technical people, they suddenly realize. What they tell you is that they typically along the lines of, oh, Mr. X was very impressed with your skills. However, we don't have any openings for you right now. And then, of course, next month they see the same job posted again. And it goes on to say there's an objective verdict here. These companies are trying to make a recruiting process efficient, better for employers and employees. As a final solution, he says, I tried to describe what online freelancer markets would look like for people like me. I went to freelancer.com, decided this might be a route for me. You can compete with hundreds of low-wage programmers from third-world countries with exceedingly crappy projects. It's an unmitigated race to the bottom. Even if I could land these jobs in an environment where the competition basically works for free, there's no way to make a living off this. He goes on to talk a little bit about the pricing, too. But he says, I now have a few weeks runway left, and I'm drastically overtaken by my rapidly mounting debt. I feel obsolete, and I'm afraid it's starting to show outwardly. Entrepreneurs will sometimes complain how they can't find good programmers or how there's a shortage in tech. Oh, man, we have talked about that, how we hate hearing that. But they're not talking about people like me. They're talking about 20-something Ivy League postdocs with stellar CVs. Personally, I will just keep looking. Maybe something will turn up, but it's a cautionary tale. He says unemployables unite. Chances are more people like me are out there. Maybe you recognize yourself in my story. Maybe you're at an earlier or later stage than me. Maybe your life story is very different and the end results still look the same. Or maybe you got a lucky break at some point. My plea is that we unite. If we currently are hiring programmers, if you're currently hiring programmers and you recognize yourself in my story, give someone a chance who looks like me. We could even all decide to self-identify instead of inevitably getting found out when they review our resumes. We might opt to tag ourselves openly and maybe even proudly. Yes, my background is checkered and diverse, but I'm knocking on your company's door, so we might do great things together. I might work out, I might not, but honestly, the chances are not really different if you hire anyone else. I would argue the outcome of hiring an unemployable programmer might in fact be better overall because we're motivated and we get stuff done, as opposed to the hipster rockstar programmers. We actually do eat and breathe code. It's a pretty call to arms cry to the other unemployables.
Yeah, so it starts off really well. I think he has a great point about, when you're doing your own thing, opening a shop or doing any kind of startup, it's really important to mind your P's and Q's on the whole personal liability thing, right? Because the whole point of all of these vehicles, LLCs, S corps, I'm not a lawyer, but the whole idea is to insulate you if it goes bad, right?
Yeah.
To say that, well, the company can close when the company closes. It's insolvent. That's it.
Yeah, but you can have that legal structure, but if something happened here and
if he felt bad and guaranteed things for people.
Well, no, I could just see it like if what if let's say like the recording computer here in the studio died and Jupiter Broadcasting didn't have the credit or the cash to cover it, I would go put that on my personal card. I could say that because I've done that before.
Yeah, but
there was probably a point where I'd put like $14,000 of gear on my own personal credit just because I needed to start the company. That was like my investing in the company basically. And I've done that. I've done that several times too. I try to walk a line, but as the company grows, there's times where you just as an owner you have to put in a ton of your own money and basically bankrupt yourself in the process and hope that you build the company up. And sometimes it's just risk. It seems like you can't avoid it.
Well, but your case of buying hardware for an expansion or because something breaks is a little different than backstopping payroll. Right?
Yeah, right.
Right. So there's a big difference between guaranteeing the payroll liability, which is not yours, and shit, my laptop exploded.
Right. Yep.
Let me go put it on my, Amex or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I follow.
Which, and when he says debt, it's all relative. I'm thinking very large amounts of debts, right? That a company with that number of people at that size.
Well, and he says he decided not to downsize. Yeah.
Right. It may really only be $10,000 or something relatively. This is one of the problems I have with this article. There's a lot of extreme statements.
The thing is, though, it's really easy trap to fall in. You've got a project, you're close to completing it. You're supposed to get paid when that project's done. Of course, that doesn't mean the client pays on time. Yeah.
Right. Because the client decides that they thought they were getting something different. Right. I mean, it's a really classic story.
So what part are you connecting with? What parts are you connecting with the most that do work for you? Is it
I feel very sympathetic for the whole. He feels bad about the people who lost their jobs, that they don't like him anymore, whatever he backstopped their pay, whatever he did that was objectively stupid, but he's upset about. I get that. Feel bad. Buy him a beer. This whole business about, being unemployable, he has half of a point at the very end, right, about the fake shortage. We've talked about this at length. It is true that there are companies right now who I've been doing iOS since there was an iOS SDK, would not hire me if I wanted a job because I don't have a CS degree. Period. Right? Mm-hmm. Like they would not hire me. They'd hire some kid out of school who doesn't know what he's doing. But do you want to work there? Right? Like this is my whole thing. If you're not, I could never get a job at Microsoft.
But doesn't it also come down to there's too much inventory, so they have to come up with these really crazy arbitrary ways to cut through the extras?
I think there's too much inventory at these very well-known, very stable companies that you've heard about that you could call your, third cousin twice removed. And she'd know too.
Right. Yeah.
Like even here, we have in New Jersey a bunch of big companies. We have Merck, Johnson & Johnson, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You guys do, don't you?
Right. It's really hard to get a job there because everybody wants to work there. Why? Because they still have pensions. They have 401ks. Right. If you're looking to do the W-2 thing and you want a big company, of course you're going for one of those. But if you're having a hard time, maybe you have to consider that 50-man shop or that 10-man shop.
This is exactly what I was just going to say.
Where the benefits aren't as good.
Yeah.
They certainly don't have a 401k, right? But you can get a job. And as a developer, even a low-paying dev job is still above the national average.
This is why I think contract work is going to become a lot more common for this type of skill set because these types of companies. To me, if I was a developer and I wanted to I wanted to work in this kind of field, and to me, the perfect scenario sounds to be an independent contractor and have 2, maybe 3 clients that I see. And I don't know how that would be. Maybe every now and then, or once a week, or some kind of rotation in there. So that way I'm spreading out my risks if any one of them screws up, but it's not a huge workload, and it's small businesses that need like there is so many real estate offices around here that now have apps I was.
Well, that's not as great an opportunity.
No, I know. But I'm just starting like this. Every business now has all these. No, I know these apps suck. They're these like pre-packaged, rebranded.
That's exactly what they are. They bought them online for $500.
I know. But there are going to be some offices that want to have a notch above. They want to have a step above. Maybe like there's just a lot of little opportunities in small businesses for different things. In my experience, every place I've ever worked at, there's been some development aspect. If they're more than 10 people, there's some project there that they need something written for them, something done. But it's not usually enough work to employ somebody full time. And I think people might be needing to consider just a big mind shift in mindset change in how you view employment. Take it back under your control. You manage it. You reach out to people. You kind of diversify your risk a little bit instead of going to one company trying to get that job. Now, I'm not saying the other one doesn't work, because there's also a lot of businesses out there where there's an opportunity for somebody to come sit and just be a full-time dedicated person. That's an amazing opportunity too.
Well, if you live in any area with like an interactive agency, even small like dev shops, every, whatever you want to call them, interactive agency, dev shop, let's just use the term dev shop for now, even though those are kind of different things, but same idea. They only have work when they have a client.
Right.
So, in fact, this is one of the fundamental things, that having employees is super hard for those companies because they expect to get paid every 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And what if you're, a small dev shop and your big client decides that they're going to go bankrupt, right? You're out of luck. But wouldn't it, this is literally what I do, right? When I was between projects, what I would do way back when, I would email local dev shops with the understanding that, of course, it's their project, not going to be able to show it, not going to be able to put it in a portfolio, can't use it as a sales tool for myself, right? So that all sucks. But you know what? When they have overflow, or when maybe they don't have an on-site iOS developer, they really want to make sure no other vendor gets a relationship with the client, because you know what? That sucks. Having been on both sides of the table.
Yep.
You don't want to share a client because all the other vendors are going to sit there and do is try to badmouth you, and vice versa with them, right? Because nobody wants to be the second vendor. Everybody wants to be the primary.
Yeah.
Oh, you've been here. You have a war story.
Oh man, yeah. It's and I've also been tempted to be the guy doing the trash talking too. And I've that's a lesson I learned. I stopped doing it, but it's tempting because
I had a case about a year and a half ago where we were doing the front end, and a other company was the legacy contractor, and they're doing the back end, and they refused to give us documentation because they were afraid of that we might try to, snake the whole project.
I found, that the biggest temptation I had was it was almost like a built-in marketing opportunity. Because I could be like, we don't do it that way. See, when we do this, what we like to do is, or if we had done that, we would document that like this for you, and we would put that available online. Things like that. And that's what I had. That was nothing really mean, nothing like really super nasty, but that's the kind of temptation I'd have to fight all the time.
Well, and because you feel a ton of empathy for the last guy in that situation, because he was probably forced into a fixed bid, and there was probably some hostage negotiation at the end of the project to get the sign off.
Yep.
I mean, that's just the way it goes on a fixed bid.
Yeah.
If you go in there, it's like, well, there are some enhancements that could be made here.
Yeah.
Anyway, evil sales tactics aside, Chris, you're a horrible. You Linux guys are brutal.
We actually, we came from a battle-hardened era where we were fighting against a massive juggernaut, Monopoly, who had a home turf advantage where I lived specifically.
See, I came up in when India was going to kill us all area, so I'm always, one of my old sales lines was, well, you might not be having those problems if you didn't offshore it. Yeah. Sorry to our foreign listeners, but it is what it is.
So our buddy's lesson. Did you have a takeaway lesson from this guy's post?
I think he's wrong, right? I think he's not employable at the types of jobs he wants because there's just so few of them, right? Go work for the little startup in the shitty office. As long as if your paycheck's clear, what do you care?
Well,
really,
people really care. It's funny, man, as I had this, and we don't have to belabor this, but I've had this conversation with a couple of people in person, and it always, people are willing to do, and, different people have different situations. People are willing to take a lot to get health benefits.
Well, I'm saying, if you need help, get what you need. If you need benefits, get benefits. If you need, whatever, if you need a W-2, make sure it's that, right? But
Yeah.
There are plenty. I mean, go on Angel's List, go on go on Craigslist, go on freaking Reddit. I know someone who just got a really good contracting gig who's not me, and I'm annoyed about it. On Reddit, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, really.
there are tons of ways to get untraditional forms of quote unquote employment.
Yes.
And there are tons of little dev shops and little agencies. Trust me, I've had to compete with all of them. They're everywhere.
And if there's a company out there, you know, in your local neck of the woods or somewhere out there that you're on the internet that you're super passionate about and there's a need they have, maybe try solving it for them and presenting that to them and make yourself useful. And you never know. You'd be surprised how quick you can get a job that way.
Well, not even that, right? Like, even if you want to do a little more prestige, right? You know, Dockyard, Thoughtbot, all the big, like, $300 an hour dev shops literally are always taking resumes, right? Because they have more money than God.
I know, because I've experienced it, he says.
No, I know, because those sons of bitches.
Because they're bastards. Mr. Dominic, let me tell you about something else you could do. And this is a good way to change gears, I think, if you're making a transition. Especially if you want to get current on the stuff that really is getting people paid. Go over to linuxacademy.com, linuxacademy.com/coders. I love Linux Academy because it's built by people that are truly passionate and enthusiastic about open source and Linux and the entire stack around that. And that means their content not only is currently is always up to date and current, but it also means they're following new technologies as they emerge, and they're usually the ones that really resonate out in the market. You know, things like virtualization, Docker, all the AWS services, a lot of people deploying over at Nginx, a lot of people still getting their Red Hat certifications. The OpenStack technology stack, learning that is such a valuable skill set, especially if you end up in that DevOps role. There's so many great options over at Linux Academy to get you up to the next level, and here's the best part. You get to choose from 7+ Linux distributions. You get to keep track of your progress as you go along. A Linux Academy is a really nice system. You log in, it gives you time estimations of the different sections. For me, that's particularly nice because I'm able to say this section or this topic or this concept. That's 2 hours of my time. That's 6 hours of my time. It's not this big nebulous thing, this huge thing that I've heard about all these years. It is 2 hours of my time. That I grok, and it then becomes amazing that I can learn something like whatever it might be. Let's just say it's Ruby on Rails, or this, you know, say actually this is a particularly good one. Is I was refreshing myself on rsync when I was moving between a NAS server, right? Because they have actually, this is really cool. This is what I really love is they have these nugget coursewares. You can go to linuxacademy.com/nuggets. They're deep dives. They're like 6 minutes long, 10 minutes long, an hour long. It just kind of depends on the content. You just whoop, 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 right into that one particular topic. Manipulating logs with SED, dig for DNS, user keyloggers, Linux signals, logging with scripts, video conversion with Handbrake on the command line. Now, boy, if you want to do a big batch of conversions, Handbrake is a great tool to do that. VirtualBox headless. You see what I'm saying here is like, even for me, as somebody who isn't currently like trying to get new reviews or learning new software stacks, there's just certain aspects of Linux Academy that I'm able to go refresh myself on. Or when new technology stacks come out and I want to speak with some authority, I can go to Linux Academy. If I want to challenge myself, I can go to Linux Academy. And you can too. There's a big community over there too. A lot of them are from Jupiter Broadcasting. They kind of give you a little nudge when you need it. It's a pretty cool system. I always get a thrill out of hearing about people that have success stories from Linux Academy too. Please tweet them at me if you get them. Go over to linuxacademy.com/coders. You get the Coder Radio discount. You can try it out with our special discount. Maybe choose some of the different distributions. Do some of the scenario-based labs so you get real hands-on training with that stuff so you feel like you got some serious experience. If you've been curious about the AWS stack and if it really is that big of a different beast, scenario-based labs are great for that because part of your Linux Academy subscription pays for the AWS services. So that way you're not going to have happen to me. Like one day after playing around with AWS, this is a little while ago, playing around with AWS, I get busy. I don't make it back to it for a month. For a month, you guys. That was a huge mistake. It was like a $220 bill just for leaving the instance running. Part of your Linux Academy subscription covers all of that. They spin up the virtual machines on demand as you need them. They adapt the virtual environment to match the Linux Linux distribution you chose for your courseware. You get a public SSH login to it. I mean, it's just slick. Go over to linuxacademy.com/coders and check them out. linuxacademy.com/coders, and a big thank you to Linux Academy for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. The Coder Radio program. The Coder Radio program. All right, moving right along in the Coder Radio program. I like this topic of keeping current, and it's one that our audience struggles with. We get emails on it all the time. We get comments in the subreddit, and there's different takes on it, and there's ones we've kind of hovered around, and I have to ask, like, if maybe there's just any point to it. But I wanted to, before we go there, let's discuss this a little bit. You had the topic to chew on. keeping current, and you started with, does tech get too old? As in, like, is it get too old by the time you learn it? Is that what you're implying?
Well, one problem that I'm kind of overly obsessed with, I think, is general marketability, especially if you want to do contracting.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Oh,
because
sure.
that's a lot harder than just
Or
getting
get a better job, or if
Right.
the current job goes bust, like you got to go somewhere. Like, how presentable are you? I think that's pretty reasonable to always be thinking about that.
So, like, one of the things I've been kind of kicking around is, like, Rails does what I need it to do, and what most of the people I do work for, and, all that kind of fun stuff.
And do you think it also,
Like 99% of the time, but go ahead.
it's got a brand to it, right? So
It's got a brand, but it's also, and this is kind of where I'm thinking, now that it's old, it's a little commoditized, and when I say a little, I mean a lot.
I agree.
So it becomes a lot harder to, one, fend off, not to be waving my Donald Trump American flag here, offshore competition, but it really does, right? Two, and again, this is going to sound terrible, Rails is almost too easy to pick up, right? To the point of, there are these like 3-week Rails camps, and there's literally viable competition. Now, they're not as good.
Do you think that makes you vulnerable for replacement? Is that why you say that?
I think it has. I think it has had a material effect, actually.
Oh, okay.
In that, selling, if you're going into a new either job or probably more, again, my whole experience with jobs is not exactly perfect in terms, because I haven't done that kind of thing in a very, very long time. But if you're trying to be an independent contractor, do a dev shop, whatever, you're trying to sell this. Let's say you're talking to, someone who doesn't know you from Adam, right? You're going to do this beautiful, responsive design, Ruby on Rails web application. It's going to cost them, I don't know, Chris, what sounds reasonable? Just give me a number. It doesn't really matter.
Let's say it's $12,000.
$12,000 sounds great, which actually sounds super reasonable, right? For everything, including responsive design. They're like, well, we went on Upwork, or we went on Odesk, or freelancer.com, and we could get it done for like $800. Or there's this local kid who just got out of this Ruby boot camp who will do it for $4,000. And yes, their project probably won't go well, right? And, Alex was in the chat. He hasn't been terribly impressed with people out of boot camps. I would imagine that that's the case. I haven't employed or in any other way supervised one of them, but again, they must have some value.
The boot camp, well, it depends on it depends on the student. If you're somebody who just needed a little boost and a point in the right direction, great for you. Especially if you're already pretty familiar with the concepts when you get there. But there's a lot of people that don't fit that description.
Yeah, I mean, it seems rough, right? So
here's what Alex Bell is saying, and I kind of agree. Does it matter if it's how commoditized the technology is, and does it matter more about the market you're playing to? Because anything with enough momentum will eventually get commoditized, and
so that's a fair point, right? JCPenney's can sell a T-shirt for $20, but Nordstrom can sell it for $50.
Yeah,
and it can be the same T-shirt.
Yeah, basically.
So that is a fair point. I think, and that may be an issue with the way I've dealt with in the past lead generation, things like that, where I relied heavily on, because as you scale, you need more and more and more and more and more in a bigger funnel. And eventually, it's really tempting to go down market, which is definitely not a good idea. So maybe, but even if that's true, right? Even if you stay up market, there's still a lot of Rails shops. I mean, look at Dockyard, one of the biggest ones. Well, they've now totally rebranded and moved away from Rails because they couldn't close a deal at the rates they wanted. Mm-hmm. I mean, in fact, if I could dig it up, we can put it in after show. They had their Brian the Senadella. Hope I said that right. Or Brian, I apologize for butchering your name. Mm-hmm. Has a great post on their blog about it was just getting ridiculous. I mean, they charge something, I don't know their exact rates, but it's substantial, right? It's $200 plus an hour, which is very high.
Yeah,
but, again, that's the market they're in. And they're getting killed by people at like $75 an hour or $60 an hour, which are more like individual rates. So their solution was to simply, they rebranded, they're now a Ember.js JavaScript design shop. which is a fancy way to say we sell people on how pretty things look, which is fine. Like, I think they're awesome. I'm not like beating them up or anything. But if you take that as just one case study, does that mean that, look at all the big Ruby shops, right? There was Dockyard, there was Thoughtbot. Well, Thoughtbot's more a mobile shop than anything else right now. I mean, look at their projects, listen to they do their marketing podcasts and their blog. They're really, what are they doing? They're pioneering open source Swift right now, right? With Argo and a bunch of their other JSON parsing stuff. Why? Because it's new and it's not, there's not a million other competitors there. But I'll let you jump in.
Well, what I'm see with there's a couple of things that are particularly challenging. If this was a traditional market with a traditional commodity and good being built and assembled and shipped, it wouldn't. One thing that it wouldn't constantly suffer from as much, I would think, is everything constantly gets repackaged, recommoditized, and rebuilt into an easier turnkey solution as time goes on. And so when new things get introduced, it requires an expert and somebody who's just, really a magician to make something amazing out of it. And those people have the first to market advantage, and they often set the pace and the tone for design and ideas and concepts. And then as time goes on, like, I think back to, well, there's a couple of things. Like, not to just to bang on this one too much, but like hosting and WordPress. Like now you can deploy a WordPress blog in like a minute, and there's like a dozen different ways online to get your own website up and going. It used to require that a business owner go out, hire a web dev guy somehow, maybe through word of mouth, maybe through a business referral group or Craigslist or whatever. That seems to be the common ones in my experience. And then bring them on, be insanely dissatisfied typically with the work because neither one of them could communicate properly. Right. And then they would have this website that was not maintainable. It was some custom creation thing that would eventually fall apart. And it was on some sort of server somewhere. Now we have a turnkey push button, an entire complicated CMS, very well developed, updated constantly, is now deployed for you, and it can be done by somebody who's really has no experience with the underlying technology at all. And so that keeps happening at every level in the technology field, in every single sector. So to me, it feels like a constant rat race. It feels very stressful. And that's why, like, I think we sit here and we worry about skill rot, and we worry about, like, do I have to constantly follow the shiny, or should I do tried and true? Because there's this consistent pressure of that rides on top of us on these jobs. And even though we don't talk about it a lot, I think we feel it a lot. And what you're talking about here really makes me feel that.
Well, and not to torpedo my own argument, though, I've definitely seen in my own experience, like, once you go high enough up market, they don't care what the technology is anymore. They just want results. So then all those problems of being bid into oblivion kind of go away. But it's really hard and, more importantly, extremely expensive to be in that high market rate. I mean, your operating costs are absurd. And
it's the whole positioning of your business.
It's trade shows. I mean, a couple $1,000s a ticket per person. You got plane tickets. You got. I might take another heart attack right now thinking about it.
Well, and I'll give you an example of people hate it when I do this. Screw you guys. It's a really easy way for me to relate this. But to give you an idea of the concept difference of work, like if you want to go up market, and let's take the Linux Action Show. So Linux Action Show can do two things. It can report the news, or it can actually be there and be part of the news and captured and actually make news.
Right.
And so the difference in how you do that is to report the news. You collect news stories, you review them, you analyze them, and you give your analysis in the show, and that's valuable. But that we could do. But if we actually want to contribute to the news cycle, like if we actually want to go out there and help capture news as it's happening, then we have to keep flying out to conventions, right? We have to ship equipment that costs $600 to ship the equipment there, right? We have to stay in a hotel room for a couple of nights and fly, which is $1,000 to fly there, and it's about $800 in hotel rooms. And we have to go out and interview people, which takes hours and hours, and sometimes we come back horribly sick about every other time from it. And then we spread that horrible sickness to our entire family. Also, that way we can go out there and capture some interviews. And the difference is we play an interview versus we read an interview that somebody else does, right? And that's the actual manifested difference in the show. But the unbelievable amount of work just to get that slight difference is it's almost unbelievable, right? But what it does is it positions LAS as actually being there on the scene, interviewing community members, contributors to open source, and capturing where they're at the time in the show, and it actually is capturing that moment. And the only way to do it is to be there. But it is such an enormous difference in work between reading the news and then analyzing it, and actually traveling there and capturing the news. And all it really does is it comes across slightly different in the show, but what it really does is it positions the show differently. But it's a huge amount of work and cost to actually get there.
Okay, so because we were just talking in the chat as well, which people should listen live to see the chat. The nearest analogy to that, then, right, to the going to the interviews, and in terms of like what I do, would be, I'm sorry, man, your app idea is great. I'm not going to do it because you're an individual, and that creates a tremendous amount of risk for me. I'm only going to work with big businesses, right? I'm only going to work with, whatever size business.
Right, but to get to get the big businesses to take you seriously, you really have to position yourself in a much different way.
You have to be at the trade shows. You have to have all the collateral, which means expensive dongles, keychains, marketing materials. I mean, that's tough. It could take you to close one of those deals could take a year, right? I mean, really. At the size of an enterprise deal, it could take.
And today, too, you also have to be maybe having some sort of blog presence if possible, podcasting if possible, tweeting if possible. Like, you have to have an opinion that people, and maybe even a name for yourself a bit if you really want to do well. But you don't have to.
Let's be honest, you kind of really need an intro. Yeah, you kind of need someone to introduce you to the right person who can then introduce you to the right other person.
Yeah, and it helps if they can say, like, he's the creator of or something like that, too.
It does help, yeah.
Yeah. So how does this relate back to keeping current? I mean, do you feel like this is a rat race that it depends on?
I feel like some people are doing this thing where, every 3 years we say, oh, Rails is old, we're going to go to Node, even though we're doing relational problems and we're writing somebody's web app back-end in Node because we can charge more for Node.
That is a thing, isn't it?
And now we're going to Go. I mean, in fact...
Your website is an API, and the front end is another client for this API. And now anybody can create an app around it, and nobody does.
Right, I mean, you know who the biggest consumer of your API is going to be, like 99.99% of the time? You.
Yeah, and now what you've created is just a new monster, your own custom monster you have to maintain.
Well, not only that, the 4 people who might actually care outside your organization, now you have to support those developers. I mean, that's just not fun. I do wonder if, like, am I becoming a curmudgeon where I'm like, well, I can do this in Rails. Let's take, like, someone wants to write yet another Instagram-like app, right? My thing would be like, well, okay, do the backend in Rails. Is that wrong? I mean, I definitely know some other people would sell them on Go at this point, just because it's the new shiny.
This would be Alan Jude's argument for using PHP.
It is, and it makes me want to throw up a little bit that I'm effectively making the PHP argument.
Yeah, you are.
That at the end of the day, all you care about is returning JSON.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess that you can argue the technology is different, but I don't know. I think it'd be interesting to look at the similarities.
I mean, Node makes sense for when you're doing something event-driven, but
yes,
most of the time you're not, right? Most of the time you're writing yet another relational application. So what's great? Anything plus Postgres.
Yeah.
Hell, it could be ASP.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'd like to see you go full curmudgeon for like a good 6 months. I don't think you'd make it longer than 3. I'd like to see you try 6.
I haven't. I have not. Like, Chris, I've tried. All right? I tried. Like, I'm trying to get into the Go thing, but I have no reasonable use case for it.
Yeah, that's really what it is. That's my thing too. That is big reason why I just keep putting things off. Is for learning Ruby or Python for myself is I have so many other things to do, and I just don't have a problem yet that I can conceptualize that solves. I bet if I could go spend another week in a tent somewhere, in a pop-up tent by a river, I could probably come up with a few things I wouldn't mind developing. But in the meantime, I just don't have time to come up with anything.
Well, I mean, and this is not just a defense of Rails, right? This is like, if you're a Django guy, okay, if you're a Java play guy, great. Like,
Or Rust, like Rust is saying. Rust we get it constant, but again, the same problem is like.
or hell, Perl, even PHP, right?
I actually think this argument you're making is the same argument a lot of people apply to not switching to, say, Linux. I could switch to Linux, but the Mac is basically doing everything I need. What is the Mac not doing other than it costs me a lot of money? Right? That's I think that, like, there's that.
Okay, but you're not even saving money, right? I mean,
right, if you want to get a nice laptop, you're not really saving money, is what you're.
right?
Yeah.
Right. Like if you want to buy the XPS 13.
Yeah.
I don't know. What is
I'm
the
not
counter?
saying the
What
argument's-
am I missing?
I'm not saying the argument's right. I'm just saying this sounds like the same argument not to switch platforms. And eventually, there is some compelling reason. There's some difference that a problem you eventually need to solve, and that difference has the solution in it. And you go, well, okay, I'll try it.
So my concern is that I'm turning into what this guy turned into, right? From the article. From
the unemployable guy. Yeah.
Right. He did the one thing for so long, and that was it.
Yeah, I did that to myself when it came to Windows administration. I'll tell you, I switched
you love
over.
Windows.
Well,
by the way, how is your Windows 10 install?
Well, let me tell you, I reviewed Windows 10 on this week's Linux Action Show, and that was a process. And by the way, thanks to YouTube for pulling down the video. Windows 10 versus Linux.
Yeah.
Windows, that's such a great title. That was going to do great on YouTube. Windows 10 versus Linux, and they pull it down. Not because of the title. They pulled it down because we played a little video from Wired. Even though it was fair use because it was news commentary, Google. Thanks for assuming I'm guilty first. Anyways, where was I going with that? Because I was building towards something. But then the damn YouTubes. I tell you what. Windows 10.
Yeah.
Windows 10. Yeah, it was an interesting experience. I think it's a hot mess. I'm sorry.
Really, I haven't tried it yet, so.
I hear it's decent performance-wise, but usually every clean Windows installation is. The start menu is better than I expected, although I don't find the tiles. A couple of problems I've had is like the Photos tile and the Xbox tile. They change pictures so often that I don't actually know which one's which. I just don't have the locations memorized yet. Search seems fast. I don't understand why it is conceptually okay. Like why like when Linux has a couple of different UIs, we're like, oh, Linux is so inconsistent. Oh, look at KDE. It's got so many buttons and options. And then yet in Windows 10, there's literally 4 spots for me to change my screen brightness. And literally, not joking, in one spot it says screen will sleep every 25 minutes, and another spot it says screen will sleep never. And I didn't know which one actually worked until I just left the computer alone for 25 minutes. Turns out it does go to sleep in 25 minutes. Even if you go into the power settings, it says screen sleeps for never. But then if you go into advanced, then it says screen sleeps in 25 minutes. But then if I click on the notifications area and I bring up the little notifications area with the buttons, it says that my screen isn't asleep. And I don't know. I can't tell you why everybody thinks it's such a great update, because to me, it looks like a hot mess. It looks like 3 or 4 different UIs stacked on top of each other. I don't know why. Metro apps with a title bar, that doesn't seem like an improvement. That just seems like watered down apps. Those should have been Windows applications with standard Windows controls. I don't know why they're Metro apps with a title bar. That doesn't make it better, not making it full screen. That just makes it still a half-assed application, in my opinion, that doesn't do as much as a Windows app, that doesn't fit in with the rest of my desktop. And by the way, I don't know if anybody noticed, but it's 2015, and the fact that Microsoft barely has high DPI support is pretty pathetic. It's pretty pathetic. How long ago did Apple ship the MacBook Pro? Seriously.
Oh, it's been a while, yeah.
And when they shipped it, they got their operating system high DPI. Now, it took some third-party apps a while to update, but give me a break. You open up any MMC, control panel applet, error message, go to the event viewer, anything like that. It looks like crap. It looks so blurry, it's almost unreadable. Because on my Dell XPS, Windows is scaling those dialog boxes up 250%. So like the X and like an error message is all jaggy and gritty, because it's scaling up the little tiny image 250% in an operating system that shipped in 2015. But all the reviews, it's great. Oh, it's revolutionary. It's amazing. It's a hot mess. I don't see what is more compelling over Windows 7 if you have a traditional desktop use. If you don't have a traditional desktop use, have at it, Haas.
So okay. One, right? A vast majority of Windows users do not have high DPI screens.
I disagree. There's a lot of... If you go over to Best Buy right now, half those laptops have high DPI screens.
All these guys upgrading from Windows 7 do not have new computers.
Yeah, but a lot of people buying Windows 10 machines today are going to ship with the operating system that doesn't support the hardware it's shipping on.
Yeah, but they're Windows users. They don't even know. Oh, whoa! Did I say that out loud?
I guess I'll back up and I'll say this. Actually, no. I have issues with the privacy stuff too. Like, it's pretty egregious what they're doing user privacy wise in Windows 10 as well. So I just don't find it super compelling.
So you're not going to be doing the Windows Action Show like I wanted.
No, but I did give my review, and I tried to find the good things about it too. I also find just Cortana not to be super useful, but its speech recognition is damn good. Damn good. I basically dictated an email slightly slower than I could type it, and it got pretty much all of it. It doesn't do things like new line, and doesn't pick up things like exclamation mark super well, but just sitting here speaking like if I were sitting here speaking like this, dictating an email to Michael Dominic right now, I think it would be capturing every single thing I'm saying. So, yeah, you can, Sean PC asks if you can opt out of the privacy things. If you don't use a Microsoft account and you don't use Cortana, it saves you a bit.
So who's really using a Microsoft account? Like, anyone is doing that.
I think every home user is. I did.
Really? People understand that concept?
Well, so when you install Windows 10, it asks you for your Microsoft account. And it walks you through figuring out what your Microsoft account is. And if you have a Hotmail account or, anything like that, then
if Apple asks people to only log in with their... Actually, you can do that, but no.
I think you can now. I don't know.
You can now, but it's kind of weirdly... Yeah. All right, so...
there's other things, too, I don't like about it. Like, if you use a OneDrive and then you use BitLocker to encrypt your hard drive, it stores a copy of your BitLocker key in your OneDrive drive. And which is then that's accessible to anybody at Microsoft with a subpoena, or it's potentially accessible if somebody compromises your OneDrive account. And these kinds of settings that users won't know about are disturbing. It collects app usage data and it monitors the applications you use on Windows and collects metrics on that and sends that to them. It collects metrics on the networks that you connect to and then sends that to Microsoft. It automatically prompts users to share the Wi-Fi network and passwords they join with their contact lists. All these things to me are a little unsettling. And then you combine that with the fact that the UI is still a little hit and miss. Like, it's better, but it's... I don't think it's going to solve their problem. I think it's going to be a good stopgap, and the press has been really good for them. But we saw that coming. I don't think it's going to change anything.
So I think it actually will.
I think what it'll do is it'll give Windows another couple of years, but basically I don't think it's going to...
I think it's going to revitalize the .NET development community.
What? Are you...
Yep.
Just stroke it a little bit.
I don't believe you. Yep. I think it is.
I'm sorry. How?
Right. Look at the bigger picture, right? They open sourced a bunch of .NET components. Xamarin is actually... No, Alex Bell, I am not high, but thank you for asking. Xamarin is making huge strides to make their skills once again marketable in a much broader sense, right? And a lot of people know and like C#.
You just retweeted the article about how devastatingly boring the .NET ecosystem is right now for developers.
Did I just do that?
Well, you did it like this weekend or something, yeah. And it's in the subreddit.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm not saying I'm going to do it. I'm saying that this is going to be enough to wake them up.
What about Windows 10, though, do you think it does that? What about Windows 10 gets people excited?
Nothing. The same thing about Mac Yosemite or the Rio Grande edition or whatever the hell it's called. Oh, I'm sorry, El Capitan.
I don't know. I mean, from a developer standpoint, there's actually interesting new APIs they add that are both available on iOS and Mac OS. I mean, look at now they're adding Metal even on Mac OS.
Yeah, it's because so many game developers are really
but I know, but Core Audio and Core Video have been adopted quite well, and these things are, there's a potential. Actually, Photoshop is getting Metal support. Then if Adobe's doing it, I mean, I'm just like I'm not saying like there's just a bastion of development and excitement, but at least there's compelling things there for developers to ship real applications that do things. Microsoft wants developers to ship modern apps in their store, and by the way, their store is still pretty...
No, that is not what they want. See, you were living in 2012.
I think you mean 2015, because that's what they're doing. You go in their store. There's not a single Windows desktop app in their store.
That is the sideshow guy with the monkey and the jack in the box playing the tambourine or whatever when he smacks the cymbals together. That's all a joke. They know it's a joke. No one's gonna. It's a waste of time. No one's gonna cross-compile iOS apps and make Windows apps because it makes sense. Because then you have to support all those 4 users.
I'm not following like how you think Microsoft is encouraging developers to write stuff.
It's the good press. There's already a huge market of downtrodden, oppressed .NET developers. I'm kind of over-exaggerating their situation. But really, they've been left out of a lot of the excitement over the last 5 to 10 years, right? I mean, in all honesty, what do they have? Azure. But outside of the enterprise, it didn't mean a whole lot. And even in the enterprise, it really isn't.
See, I think you are downplaying Azure and you are upplaying the Windows desktop. I think what's compelling for Microsoft for developers doesn't really have anything to do with the Windows desktop.
You're right. It doesn't. It has to do with the iPhone.
Yeah. And back-end services.
Visual Studio, right. It has to do with Microsoft laptops now being real contenders to MacBook Pros as development.
Give me a break. No way.
I'm serious.
No way. No way.
You want, okay.
What, the Surface Pro? Because they've sold, 5 million? I don't know what I'm sure they've sold more than that. But I mean,
it doesn't matter. Windows 10, Surface Pro, Dell XPS, whatever. All right, people who always call me on crap when I'm wrong. I'm going to be right this time. 6 months from now, I bet that Xamarin is not only bigger, but they have a longer footprint, or Microsoft takes them over, or whatever weird way the .NET creeping into the mobile side continues to grow. The next version of ASP.NET is going to reassert their strength in that space. And they're not going to kill the open, right? They're not going to kill Ruby on Rails. They're not going to kill Docker, nothing like that. But it's going to be hot again. They're going to be revitalized. And you're going to see a lot more interest. And because of that, the only reasonable way, I'm sorry, Xamarin people who like to use Macs, but you guys are just wrong, to do that is Visual Studio. And now that Windows 10 doesn't suck, people will do that, right? This is a hearts and mind thing, right? This is downtown Redmond. This is not, is this technology better? Because it's not better. It's the same thing we just talked about.
So basically your idea is that now that they've open sourced all these tools, and because there's a big, ginormous, influential company with skin in the game backing it, that people will just gravitate that way because it's over time it's going to continue to be developed and people just trust that more. Like I'm trying to.
It's going to be okay to buy it for enterprises and for other companies. Look how desperate C# developers have been to get on mobile. All these half-cockamania, and it's not just Xamarin. There have been a whole other half-cocked ideas of getting C# on mobile.
I'll tell you where this does make sense. I'll give you an analogy. Is with Linux distributions. Linux starts out as this small free thing, but as time went on, there was a lot of options out there. But people like to go with Red Hat and Ubuntu because if they're a company, they like to know that there A is another company behind it developing it, and B a support contract is available, or it's easily to get skills. And I think people often undersell the value of Ubuntu is the fact that Canonical exists, and that Canonical can call up companies at Valve and say, hey, we'd like to work on this thing. Or they can call up all these different companies and say, hey, could you fly out to a developer conference and chat with us? And that makes such a huge difference when developing an operating system that companies will pick it just because they have another company behind it that can bankroll certain things. Or they'll pick something like Red Hat because there's a support infrastructure behind it, despite the fact that there's things out there like Debian or CentOS. You could be the same thing if you're a company and you're going to bet the farm on a big new project that you're developing in-house.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And it's not even, let's just narrow it down. Just take the one case study of Xamarin, right? Why do you think all Xamarin itself and all these third-party Xamarin developers were so excited that now they have the Microsoft seal of approval and now there's deeper integrations and some sort of quasi-official support? Because it makes it easier to sell that platform to potential clients.
So you're thinking they were thinking big.
They're thinking big. It's why do people want a Rackspace server, right? Oh, because they know they can call Rackspace and yell at them. Why do they want AWS? Because they know they've heard of AWS, right? It's name recognition. It's going to be huge, and no one's going to get put out of their job. It's not going to be like the 90s where they dominate. But the development community is going to be reinvigorated. And what is today's date? August 3rd. All right.
2015.
December. let's see if anything's changed.
Okay. This is actually pretty interesting. I'd be surprised if it was that fast because of the momentum behind so many other options.
It could take longer. But I think certainly this time next year, the de facto mobile application development platform for enterprises will not, it won't be PhoneGap or Cordova uncontested. Xamarin or some form of C# based Microsoft goodness will be in there, and it will actually be actively considered.
All right, chat room. Remind us in December, won't you? All right, you know what? I want to pop through some feedback, but first I got to mention DigitalOcean, the sponsor of the Coder Radio program. Go to DigitalOcean.com and use the promo code CODERDIGITAL. It's one word, lowercase. It'll give you a $10 credit. You can just apply it to your account. DigitalOcean is awesome. It's a simple cloud hosting provider, and they're dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way for you to get your own Linux system up and running, or a free BSD box. They have KVM-backed virtualization sitting on top of SSD drives connected to Tier 1 bandwidth all over the world. And you can get started in less than 55 seconds, and pricing plans start at only $5 a month. That'll get you 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, 1 CPU, and 1 terabyte of transfer. And DigitalOcean has data center locations in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, London, and a brand new one in Germany that is slick. It's really positioned really well for the neighbors. So if you want to do distribution in that region, this is a great data center. 40 gigabit E connections to each hypervisor. Yeah. 40 gigabit E connections to each hypervisor. It's crazy. Wow. And then also their fastest SSDs yet. You can find some pictures on Instagram and on Google+. I think they're the DigitalOcean on Instagram, but just search around on Instagram. What I really love about DigitalOcean, though, is their interface. It is so well done. It's very intuitive, but yet powerful. You can do everything from creating your droplet, templating your droplet, snapshots, destroying the droplet, transferring it. They have different regions you can just choose from right in the UI. You can pick from Ubuntu, Fedora, Debian, CoreOS, CentOS, and even FreeBSD, private networking, IPv6. The private networking is slick because that doesn't count against your transfer. So if you want to have like a front-end web server and a back-end SQL server, a front-end proxy server, and a couple back-end rigs with assets, you can set up private networking between them, and that doesn't count against your transfer. It's all on their internal LAN, right? So you're getting just incredible speeds. And remember, our promo code, CODERDIGITAL, will give you a $10 credit. You could try out their $5 rig for free, try out CoreOS for a little while, and see how neat it is to have a rolling base and containerization for your applications. Man, does that make developing so much more straightforward. You can build it on a container on your local machine, and then publish it up really nicely up to your DigitalOcean droplet, and keep CoreOS, the base OS, up to date and fresh. Keep your applications, your development environment static inside that container. Manage your security updates locally when they're ready to go and tested. Publish them up to the CoreOS machine. It's a really neat system. Remember Coder Digital when you go to DigitalOcean.com, and a big thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. Okay, Mr. Dominic, are you ready for a little bit of feedback throwdown?
Let's do this.
Now, we have one that you've tossed in here that was sent in as the tech boom workers turn to coding. Do you want to touch on that anymore? This kind of sounds like it wraps into what we've been talking about.
Go ahead.
All right, so this is an article over at PostEncounter or PostCourier.com, and it's about a 26-year-old math major who took 3-month course in computer programming and data analysis, and then went off to get a job in computing. Internet giants like Google and Facebook have long fought over top software engineers, they say, in the country. But now, companies in most every industry, either by necessity or to follow the pack, are pursuing some sort of digital game plan, creating lucrative opportunities for computer-minded newcomers who, like Minton, want to reboot their lives. So there you go. I'm talking about boot camps, about the wow. They're talking about the job openings available. They're talking, basically, they're playing up the whole not enough jobs, and they're talking about boot camps. I'll leave the rest of the audience to read. Good post sent into the show, though. Good stuff to chew on, which fits in very well with what we're going on now.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
The Silver Knight, the Silver Knight 7, actually, on the subreddit, wanted to talk about web development. He says, is there any good info on web programming such as AngularJS or React? I really want to get into web development and have run through some of the Treehouse courses in Code Academy, but I'm having a rough time putting it into practice to create a portfolio. Right now, I've been trying out AngularJS and React, but having a hard time getting to something on the page. What do you think, Mr. Dominic? You want to talk about this? Give me any general pointers, maybe?
Yeah, so Bug and I were pretty deep into Angular. Angular is in a weird place because Angular 2 just came out, or 2.0, or whatever the hell you want to call it, to be trendy and cool. But it is one of those big releases that isn't necessarily an easy upgrade. So your first thing is if you want to go Angular. Actually, I would even dial it back. Because I think I replied to this one on the subreddit. Depending on where you are, it may not even be appropriate to be diving into a huge framework, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, is it maybe better to start with basics?
I would almost say, the code school JavaScript courses are great. HTML, CSS. I used to always say just look at jQuery, but more and more I'm finding it's better to kind of leave jQuery as almost a last resort. I don't know how you feel about that.
I don't know. I feel like that's telling him to jump into the deep end a little bit.
That is the deep end, right? jQuery makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, I know, but that's the part of the problem.
Well, it's huge. I mean, the real problem is that it's like Xbox huge.
I feel like this question skips right. I feel like this question is sort of represents what's kind of super wrong right now. Is I feel like it's totally bypassing like the basic fundamentals and saying going right to I want to just have the magic pack that does things for me. I feel like what he needs to do is go to the developer.mozilla.org page and kind of start there. And I'm not trying to speak down to him, but the question to me invokes two fundamental problems that I see right here. Number one is I think a lack of the understanding of the basics, but number two, something we kind of say all the time on this show is if you really want to start there, then what I would do is go find an open source project that's something that you can understand, what's the size of something that you can wrap your head around, fork it, create a copy of it, and start breaking it for yourself and see where it goes. But honestly, I think if you haven't gotten the fundamentals down yet, you might start there before you go there.
And not to be a total shill for code school, but let's say we're misreading this, right? And he is at that more intermediate level where he should start looking at frameworks, right? They have an Angular, what do they say? They have an Angular course, thank you.
Yeah.
They have a Backbone.js course. They have a Ember course, and I think they may. What's the other big one? Chris, help me.
I'm actually looking right now at Linux Academy courseware too.
That's true too. They probably have some.
Yeah, they do. They do, and so that's something else to consider. Is I'm going through. Geez, there's so many courses here, but
I'm a little and we had this a couple weeks ago. So if you didn't listen to the show, I'd go back. There's a lot of insert noun.js going on right now.
Yeah.
And, I mean, yes, I'm using Angular quite a bit, but you don't need to know all of them, right? You don't need to, React, I would say React is much more advanced, and to be honest, I don't like this whole reactive programming thing. I'm a curmudgeon. You probably don't need to be on the bleeding edge for most things, right? Looping right back into what we talked about before.
I guess so, yeah.
Although, what the hell is vanilla.js? Someone just posted in the chat.
There you go. See, well,
love it.
It's been a half hour, so
it's been a while. People are just like taking nouns, putting JS next to them. It's
vanilla.js sounds tasty. That does sound pretty tasty.
I thought it was going to be a joke, like this is just JavaScript stupid.
Yeah. No. All right.
You should look at JavaScript the good parts if you haven't read it. That's where you should go.
Ooh, I got the new HTML5 player on YouTube. It's very fancy. Hey, I wanted to link to a video, or you linked to a video, and I wanted to mention it in the show notes. Go on mobile. Speaking of
everything I hate in one video.
Yeah,
Hi,
exactly.
And my name is Hannah, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about how to use Go for mobile platform.
So that is GopherCon 2015, and we'll have a link to that in the show notes.
And I came from Google. I've actually seen some of her other presentations. She's really good.
She's smart. She's brilliant, you might say.
In this case, her whole premise is wrong.
Oh, well.
But
not her fault, though, right? I mean,
not
because
her fault. She's promoting Go. It's her
she
job.
can't help it. Yeah, she's been influenced. She's been influenced.
Doing her job.
Of course, you'd probably be the best person to watch that video then.
I did watch it, actually. Excellent presentation. Looks cool. Totally unnecessary.
I don't believe you.
You don't believe
out
me?
of here.
Boy, you're arguing with yourself now, Mr. Dominic. That might be a sign it's time to wind this puppy down. Is there
Let's
anything?
wind it down so I can get my Visual Studio on.
All right, and remember, grab yourself a nice Budweiser because.
Budweiser commercial featuring the Crew Cut. Where there's life, there's fun.
Actually,
Come on now, it's time. This is time for a drink, Mr. Dominic. It's the end of the show. Yeah.
my dog just peed on the floor. I'll have that instead of the Budweiser.
Okay, all right.
I think that's probably it.
Jeez. All right, well, when you're not talking about dog piss, where else would you like to send people throughout the week?
I just go to buccaneer.io. It's fun.
That's nice. I like that. You can also follow him on, he's on the Twitters, at Dominuku, and at Buccaneer Tech. I'm on the Twitters. Did you know that? At Chris LAS. You can follow the network for news and announcements at Jupiter Signal. Find out when we're live, jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar. We do it on a Mondays, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. We'd love to have you show up in our chat room. Email us. Go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com/contact, won't you? Topics, coderradio.reddit.com. Feedback's welcome there as well. All right, everybody, thanks so much for tuning this week's episode of Coder Radio. Geez, happy August, and we'll see you right back here next week.